Thank you very much, Jane. So, bonjour et bienvenue à cette journée de réflexion et d'échange sur la durabilité des interventions de développement et plus particulièrement à cette table ronde sur la durabilité financière. Comme introduit par ma collègue Jane, je m'appelle Armand Zeimana, directeur par intérim du département en charge des résultats et l'impact sur le développement à la Banque africaine de développement. Nous venons d'avoir une excellente entrée en matière sur le sujet par la voie de la présentation de mon collègue Joseph Mwanda, qui dresse un état assez préoccupant du déficit en infrastructure sur le continent et des nombreux défis en matière de durabilité financière des interventions de développement qui sont tirés de l'expérience de la Banque africaine de développement. Afin de poursuivre cette réflexion, nous avons assemblé pour vous aujourd'hui un panel d'éminents experts que je vais présenter aussitôt. So let me start by welcoming Mrs. Yvonne Kwanza. Mrs. Kwanza is the Director of Resource Mobilization and Economic Relations at the Ministry of Finance in Ghana. She's in charge of development cooperation and external financing. She has a long career and experience in debt management. So welcome to this panel, Mrs. Kwanza.
Thank you very much.
Our second panelist for this very exciting conversation is Mr. Tamiru Gedefa. Mr. Gedefa is the lead executive officer at the Ministry of Water and Energy in Ethiopia. He has more than 23 years of experience in the water sector, so very experienced expert in this area. Warm welcome to this panel, Mr. Gedefa.
Thank you very much.
Notre troisième intervenant est Monsieur Firmin Croix. Monsieur Croix est conseiller technique au ministère de l'économie, du plan et du développement en Côte d'Ivoire. Il est en charge des questions de politique économique, de gouvernance, d'environnement, développement urbain, développement durable, agriculture et changement climatique. Donc, un portefeuille extrêmement riche. Bienvenue, Monsieur Croix. Nous allons donc immédiatement plonger dans le vif du sujet par une série de questions que nous allons adresser au panel. Par la suite, nous allons également donner l'opportunité au public de soumettre leurs questions en ligne à travers la boîte de commentaires que nous allons essayer de canaliser pour vous. So let me try to kick off this very interesting conversation with a question to Mrs. Kwanza. We know that in African countries, there are resource constraints and multiple competing demands. Given that context and drawing particularly from the challenging economic context of Ghana, how can we ensure that adequate resources are made available for the maintenance of infrastructure? Mrs. Kwanza, over to you, please. So, Mrs. Kwanza, I'm not sure if my question went through very clearly, so let me repeat it. In the context of resource constraints and multiple competing demands, and particularly drawing from the challenging economic context of Ghana, could you share with us some of the measures that your country has taken to ensure that adequate resources are made available for the maintenance of infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I lost you. Either it's my net. The only question I heard from you is measures we are taking to manage infrastructure. Is that the question you asked?
Yes, that's precisely it. So,
okay.
and putting this in the context of resource constraints and many competing demands on the government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to thank African Development Bank for inviting me to be a panel member. And we all know the role the bank plays in the development of our economy. So in terms of the measures we have put in place, infrastructure, I think I will look at the road sector. I will also look at the transport sector, and then maybe talk a little about agri, just a little about agri. Yes, per what our presenter made, you realize that there are big financial constraints for us. So in terms of how much of funds that we have to contribute, how much of funds we have to contribute to support international, to support projects is a big challenge. But measures we've put in place, one measure is that we should all agree that generally aid is declining. Generally getting concessional financing is declining. Also access for African countries, looking at the challenges we are facing, we have limitation on accessing international bond markets, and also accessing commercial funding, because we have to look at this whole idea of debt sustainability, etc. So one thing that one measure we've taken is that we try as much as possible to collaborate or to have co-financing measures, you get me? Because a typical project may not be financed only by African Development Bank. I have a typical project where we have African Development Bank supporting one part, we have the Japanese government supporting other part. We also have another multilateral. So one big measure that we are using to ensure that we mobilize enough resources is through co-financing, and where we are leveraging on both our multilaterals and also our bilaterals. One issue that we should all notice when you are doing a full financing, especially when you're having multilateral and bilateral, is that they have different policies and procedures. But then as much as possible, as a project document, we try as much as possible to have them to harmonize their policies and their procedures so that we can implement the project successfully. And then also we look at the various instruments. Should we do rather co-finance? Who should be in the co-financing model, and who should be doing the para financing? And in terms of that too, who should be managing to make sure that all partners are playing their role well? And especially one thing that we should all bear in mind if we have to be arranging such facility is the preparation of the project documentation. You see, how we prepare the projects and to make sure that the buy-in from the partners are very important. So it's something that we really have to look at. The second one too that we measure we are putting in place is community engagement. You know, community engagement, because these projects are being undertaken at various communities. So the question is that, what role is the community playing? What is their role in terms of governance issue? What role in terms of even after the project, how will it be sustained, etc.? And when you look at Ghana in particular, we have this whole chieftaincy issue, which is big. We have the national government already, all right, but we have this chieftaincy, and the role of the communities in terms of our traditional rulers are so very important. So if we are able to bring them on board in terms of this whole issue of sustainability and how they can also support it post-project, is also important. The other one too that we are looking at as Ghana is we've passed our PPP law, and we are passing our PPP regulation to ensure that it's not only only government that is supporting, it's not only government that is supporting, but then we also have private sector support. So we have passed our PPP law, we are doing the regulation. we've had some, and we also have, we've also set up a public investment management system where we try as much as possible to collate and to also ensure we collate all public projects that are ready for infrastructure, so that we are able to source funding for that. So that is another measure that we have taken. The other measure too is this whole idea of road tolls. You know, I think it's a big thing for every African country. The question is that how much of the collection we make can contribute to the maintenance of the project. And that is one issue that I think I'm taking advantage for African Development Bank, for all of us to critically look at it, because in terms of maintenance, you are collecting the local, if you are collecting the local currency. Meanwhile, some of these projects may require some foreign exchange cost. So the idea of this exchange loss also, who picks it up? And one other thing is, how much do you charge? You see, we have one particular road, Accra Motorway Road, that it has gone through various discussions on what appropriate tolling should we charge that will enable us maintain the road, whilst at the same time, those we are serving would also, this whole idea of affordability, who are serving, how they can also afford and pay. Because there are other routes, and how do we make that project sustainable? So that is also one thing that we are looking at. And I think African Development Bank should take it seriously for us to really follow up on this. So when we're talking of financial sustainability of our roads. Another one I want to talk about, which is, and that is for me, something that has been on my heart, is this whole issue of compensation. This whole issue of compensation where governments are expected to pay the compensation. The question I always ask is that if we have enough funds as a country, we will not be asking for external funding also. So if now government, and I also agree, I'm not against government not contributing, but the question I want to bring here on this panel is that, assuming we have about 15 projects, not coming only from African Development Bank, but we have it coming from other multilateral, coming from other bilaterals. And they are all asking government to pay compensation to have these roads or to have this infrastructure done. Have we thought of the impact on our budget? You see, and if you realize these are some of the delays when it comes to compensation, the payment of compensation delays projects. So if you have governments not paying for the compensation, then it delays the contribution that is coming from the recipient countries. And that's why I'm giving a scenario that, assuming as a country, maybe for Ghana for this year, we have 15 projects that requires compensation from government. And it's coming from different development partners. And we have to use our DRM, that is resource mobilization, internally to pay for those compensations. Look at how we have to pay for this compensation, which is a discretionary budget. Look at the debt servicing we have to pay. We have to pay salary, we have to. I believe some work, I have done a little work, but it's not too much. But you realize that it is a strain, it's a drain on government resources. So I believe that we should start finding other innovative means of paying this compensation. I'm not saying we shouldn't pay. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a contribution, but we should sit down with our development partners and find ways, some innovative means of paying some of this compensation. For now, I think these are some of the measures we are putting in place. And then another one is we have what they call the non-tax revenue that we've put a lot of regulations so that we'll be able to mop up, we'll be able to collect not only just tax, because we know the limit we have to go on tax, but we also have to see how best for non-tax we can rake in a lot of money from the non-tax revenue in terms of fees, in terms of levies, etc. That can also support, that can increase our DRM so that we'll be able to finance infrastructure. This is what I want to say for now, but I'm sure that after other panels, I can come in again. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kwanzaa. I think I'm sure that many of the things that the initiative taken by Ghana to address the sustainability of infrastructure will be actually ring a bell to the other members of the panel. I think you've mentioned some very critical initiatives, PPP laws, introducing road tolls, engaging with the community. Excellent intervention. So let me now turn to Mr. Gedefa to learn more about the experience in Ethiopia in infrastructure maintenance, and particularly in his own very challenging area of water and sanitation. Could you please share with us some of the strategies and mechanisms that ensure the revenue generation capacity of infrastructure intervention to fulfill maintenance and operational cost of these infrastructure? Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Gedefa, I think your mic is still muted.
I'm sorry. My name is Tamru. I'm work for the Ministry of Water and Energy of Ethiopia, Federal Ministry. Thank you very much. Just to begin with, water sanitation overall wash services a challenge, as we know in sub-Saharan Africa. Mostly the service level, the standard, and also the quality of provision of wash services a challenge. Our ministry is working especially on wash service in joint with other ministry of health and the Ministry of Education, especially on school washes. The challenge is there. We have a big gap. We have a 10-year strategy plan for universal access for wash service, especially for water supply, sanitation, and the hygiene. The gap is very high. The access rate is very low. So currently we are drafted wash financing strategy to unlocking is a sustainable finance solution. The trend is mostly the financing is come from the donors, the development partners, including the civil societies, bilateral and the multilateral, and also some from the ministry, from the government, from the federal and the regional government, for the both for the investment and also for the major maintenance. In principle, especially in Ethiopia, the policy is just a cost recovery for urban water supply and operation in the maintenance cost recovery for rural component, but the challenge is very high because currently, as we identify, the gap is very huge. Almost we have a gap of about 40% gap in financing of to meet the 10 years strategic plan. Because of this, the ministry now is drafted the Ethiopian wash financing strategy in which briefs the challenges, the issues currently we have in terms of the gap, in terms of the finance gap, and also the sustainability of most of our infrastructure. Because the previous project is mostly the finance during the project time only is for the investment part. Most of the project lacks the post-construction component. So because of this, the sustainability of our project is in question. Mostly we do the visibility study, not the viability study of our infrastructure, including the life cycle cost of infrastructure. Because of this, we currently formulate, which are at draft level, WASH financing strategy. There are three major identified points: decreasing the cost and increasing the efficiency, working on the non-functionality, and also on non-revenue water, because we have currently we noted that the non-revenue water is very high, is above 30%, and the non-functionality is also in two-digit, like 17–18% are non-functional. Most of the rural small scheme water supply schemes. So to get one of the strategies, so to decrease the cost in increasing the efficiency by doing working on non-functionality, on non-revenue water, and also adopting low technologies and renewable energy for especially in rural area where there is no grid, and usually using the diesel, which is currently very difficult to supply diesel for the operating. So this is one of the strategy options. The second strategy option is increasing the fund sources. This is because most of our projects have, utilities have a business plan. They have on the document, but the challenge we have is in action. Changing this business plan to action is one of the challenges. So in this strategy, we also indicate the tariffs, the tax, the transfers, especially for the WASH. The third one is increasing the finance sources, the repayable finances, especially increasing the credit worthiness of the WASH service provider, capacity building, participation of private sector, and also community participation. Community participation is very important. We also considered in our new strategy. So those are some of the initiation, but we are also working with the African Development Bank previously on the establishing of micro enterprises for the local technical providers, and also micro enterprises used in the women-led micro enterprise for supply chain. Supply chain is also one of the issues on the sustainability of infrastructure. So we are organizing, we include those options which increase also the options for the financing of the life cycle of the infrastructure. As I said, most of time we do just for the infrastructure investment, not for the life cycle of source, because of this sustainability is issue. So I hope the new strategy, which also needs some maybe on the legal issue, is there also, because it goes with the institutional capacity, structure, organogram, like the structural setup, because most of our water supply in the wash service is managed by the regional and the water utilities, urban water utilities. So I hope the new strategy which is under development will minimize the current issue related to financial sustainability in wash sector. I think, thank you. I will add also if there is more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gedefa, for sharing this very rich experience in the water sector in Ethiopia, particularly in the context of the WASH strategy that you have developed. And I'm very pleased to hear that the African Development Bank is supporting your efforts to strengthen financial sustainability of infrastructure, including through this initiative on supporting micro enterprises in the construction and maintenance supply chain. This is excellent experience that you are sharing. Je vais maintenant me tourner vers Monsieur Croix pour également bénéficier de la riche expérience de la Côte d'Ivoire en matière de stratégie et de financement innovant pour assurer la pérennité des infrastructures, particulièrement des infrastructures routières. Je crois que tous ceux qui ont l'opportunité de venir en Côte d'Ivoire sont toujours très impressionnés par les infrastructures routières de la Côte d'Ivoire et d'Abidjan et au-delà d'Abidjan. Monsieur Gros, vous avez la parole pour faire partager un peu cette expérience en matière de financement innovant pour assurer la pérennité de ces infrastructures. Merci.
Bonjour. Je voudrais d'entrée remercier les responsables de la BAD qui ont organisé ce panel et dire que ce sujet sur le thème principal, améliorer la durabilité des interventions, est opportun. Et il m'offre l'agréable plaisir de partager avec vous tout l'intérêt et l'importance de la Côte d'Ivoire sur les questions d'évaluation. Parce que la durabilité fait partie des critères édités par l'OCDE, notamment la pertinence, l'efficacité, l'impact, l'efficience et la durabilité elle-même. Donc, avant de répondre à votre question, il faut noter que pour ce qui concerne la Côte d'Ivoire, en 2022, la ministre du Plan a conduit une loi, a fait voter une loi pour montrer tout l'intérêt que la Côte d'Ivoire a pour ce qui concerne tout ce qui est évaluation. C'est la loi sur l'évaluation des politiques publiques. Ainsi, pour répondre à la préoccupation qui concerne comment pérenniser trouver les ressources ou comment la Côte d'Ivoire, l'expérience de la Côte d'Ivoire en ce qui concerne le financement des infrastructures routières, comme vous venez de le dire, aujourd'hui à Abidjan, depuis que l'avènement du chef de l'État, son Excellence Alassane Ouattara, Abidjan a un autre visage. Et ce n'est pas qu'Abidjan, toute la Côte d'Ivoire, parce que tout ce que vous voyez à Abidjan, dans toutes les localités en Côte d'Ivoire, dans tous les villages, les villes, les communes, les sous-préfectures, il y a des infrastructures routières que le gouvernement, bien sûr, avec l'appui de la BAD, que je voudrais remercier ici, parce que la BAD accompagne beaucoup la Côte d'Ivoire en ce qui concerne ces infrastructures, notamment il y a d'autres partenaires. Donc, pour revenir à notre préoccupation, notre question, il faut noter que la Côte d'Ivoire a adopté le partenariat public-privé comme élément important dans sa stratégie de développement des infrastructures. Et la Côte d'Ivoire a mis en place ce qu'on appelle un comité national de pilotage des PPP, épaulé par un secrétariat exécutif et une cellule d'appui dotée de ressources humaines expertes qui crée en fait le cadre institutionnel. Parce que pour suivre ces infrastructures, il faut des tests, il faut un cadre institutionnel, c'est important. Maintenant, il y a la gestion efficace des ressources existantes. Il s'agit à cet égard de la mise en place des mécanismes de gestion rigoureuses pour maximiser l'utilisation des ressources disponibles. Ceci implique d'adopter des pratiques d'entretien préventif pour prolonger la durée de vie des infrastructures. Et tout ceci passe également par la formation du personnel chargé de l'entretien de ces infrastructures-là. C'est dans ce cadre qu'en Côte d'Ivoire, il y a ce qu'on a appelé le FAIR, qui est le Fonds d'entretien routier, qui assure la mobilisation des ressources nécessaires pour le financement de l'entretien routier. Il y a que l'activité commerciale de la route permet d'une part, à travers l'exploitation des péages, parce que si vous prenez la voie à Abidjan pour aller à Boaké, évidemment, il y a des péages qui sont mis en place. Et comme je l'ai indiqué, ces péages-là, l'objet, c'est de mobiliser des ressources pour aider à l'entretien des infrastructures. Également, il y a l'autre approche qu'on appelle l'exploitation de solutions technologiques novatrices qui peuvent réduire les coûts des entretiens à long terme, qui reste une opportunité. Parce que de plus en plus sur certaines routes, il y a aussi, comme je l'ai indiqué tout à l'heure, des méthodes technologiques qu'on met sur les routes pour essayer de réduire les embouteillages, et tout ceci permet d'entretenir aussi les infrastructures. Donc, pour ce qui concerne les infrastructures routières, il faut noter que le gouvernement, comme je l'ai indiqué, s'appuie en Côte d'Ivoire, hein, pour le cas de la Côte d'Ivoire, s'appuie spécifiquement sur le partenariat public-privé. Le gouvernement crée le cadre institutionnel et associe le secteur privé dans le cadre de la prise en compte de l'entretien de ces infrastructures routières. Donc, dans un premier temps, pour ne pas être trop dispersé, pour ce qui concerne les routes, comme la question qui m'a été posée porte initialement sur l'entretien routier. Donc, voilà un peu, pour ce qui concerne la Côte d'Ivoire, le cadre, comme je l'ai indiqué, le cadre institutionnel, il y a le partenariat public-privé, et pour cela, il y a un comité qui s'est mis en place, qui suit tout ce qui est infrastructure routière. Donc, je voudrais une fois encore remercier les organisateurs et je reste disponible pour d'éventuels compléments à la question de la mobilisation des ressources pour l'entretien des infrastructures routières en Côte d'Ivoire. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Kwa, pour ce partage de riches expériences en matière de financement, mais également de maintenance des infrastructures routières en Côte d'Ivoire. Et c'est très intéressant l'emphase que vous avez donnée dans votre intervention sur le cadre institutionnel qui positionne le partenariat public-privé vraiment au centre de la politique d'investissement public en Côte d'Ivoire, politique d'investissement en matière d'infrastructure en Côte d'Ivoire, et le rôle du Comité national de pilotage de PPP, qui, je crois, joue un rôle très, très, très important. Alors, je remercie en tout cas les panélistes pour ce riche partage d'expérience. Nous allons poursuivre la conversation et nous allons donner l'opportunité au public de partager, de pouvoir soumettre quelques questions aux membres du panel. Alors, je vais essayer de les parcourir par là. Je crois que Jane, I hope we still have a bit of time to take questions from participants to the panel, to the discussion.
Yes, someone we do. We have about 30 minutes.
Excellent. So
thank you.
We should be able to take at least 2 or 3 questions. So let's start with, let me try to take all the questions here from my, okay. So a first question from Jindra Sekan. So let me read the question immediately. Often locally designed and locally sustainable interventions last, but the funding from NDBs isn't disaggregated enough to get to them. How will AfDB address this? So locally designed and locally sustainable interventions last, but funding from MD isn't disaggregated enough to get to them. I'm not sure I fully understand this question, but I suppose it touches on financing from MDBs. And the critical question I think raised by my colleague Karen when she made the introduction is development partners are not there to sustain the financing independently. So there's a question of sustainability. But let me go to the next question, perhaps. Further national statistics office are often underfunded, but could be a vital link to M&E data on sustainability, as would be local info lines between communities and administrations, leading to the funders and national purse holders. It's a very, very complex question. Do you agree? Who else are the actionable knowledge links? Could you perhaps share, and let me perhaps start with Mrs. Kwanzaa, your experience on M&E and drawing all the knowledge and in terms of sustainability of infrastructure. How do you link up with the whole knowledge data that is available to be able to strengthen sustainability of infrastructure?
Thank you very much. For us in Ghana, the interesting thing is that we have a National Development Planning Commission that the Constitution set up. And as part of their mandate, they are supposed to also look at the whole national M&E, that is monitoring and evaluation, because they help set the medium to long-term development plans. They also work with the various sectors to help them develop their sector plans. And as part of their mandate, we are also supposed to have provide information to them. And so they also do the monitoring with the sectors. But apart from that, one interesting thing that we did, that was, I think, about 2 or 3 years ago, we set up a monitoring and evaluation ministry. It's like it's under the office of the president, you get me? So that they will be able to work with all the various M&E departments in the various ministries. So that we'll be able to collect that information. So it's true that I think when it comes to the infrastructure side, we have a whole infrastructure, right? We have a whole infrastructure. So we have the NDPC, we have the sector ministry, and then we also have the M&E ministry that is helping with the collation. And that plan that we have is always been updated. It's always been updated. So at every time, in terms of under the road ministry or the transport ministry, they know where the gaps are, they know where they have gotten to, and they know where they have to move next. So there is some monitoring and evaluation there. But when I was preparing my notes, what I indicated was that we really, as AfDB, we really need to enhance, our whole M&E, not only to the National Development Planning, but then for our National Statistics Department. I mean, we have Ghana Statistical Department, which is close to us. It's under the Ministry of Finance. So the question I always ask is that, apart from the studies and all the statistics they are collecting, though NDPC by Constitution have been mandated, how do we get our National Statistics Department to also have this information? So it's something that I think we can explore with African Development Bank. Maybe for National Statistics to collect it, but for us currently under our Constitution by law, is the National Development Planning Commission that does that work. So that is what I want to see, which they are doing anyway very well. Yes, but at least there should be some sharing so that they can also, there should be some sharing of information, etc., so that they can also be releasing such information. But by law, it's our National Development Planning Commission that does that. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent, Mr. Kwasa. Thank you very much. And I can assure you that you are singing to the choir when you say that we should be strengthening the M&E function. I'm sure everybody will agree. Everybody in this room will agree. Let me take the next question from Mr. Sahawal Alidu. So let me read the question. Do infrastructure maintenance agencies invest the money they collect like pension funds do? This might be an option to help them generate more resources to face increasing maintenance costs. Peut-être je vais me tourner vers Monsieur Croix, qui nous a parlé tout à l'heure du fonds d'entretien routier. Et la question spécifique de Monsieur Sahawal Alidou, est-ce que les ressources qui sont générées par le fonds d'entretien routier, est-ce qu'ils sont investis un peu comme les fonds de pension afin de pouvoir assurer la soutenabilité financière, la durabilité financière du fonds dans le cadre de sa mission d'entretien donc des infrastructures routières en Côte d'Ivoire? À vous, Monsieur Poix, s'il vous plaît.
OK, merci beaucoup. Comme je l'ai indiqué tout à l'heure, la dame du Ghana vient de l'évoquer. Les questions d'évaluation sont tellement importantes. La Côte d'Ivoire, au risque de me répéter, en 2022, la ministre du Plan, Madame Kabaniale, a fait voter une loi sur l'évaluation des politiques publiques. Et cette loi, quand elle a été votée, elle va passer à l'application maintenant. Maintenant, pour ce qui concerne le fonds d'entretien routier, comme son nom l'indique, les investissements ont un coût. Quand les bailleurs financent les investissements, il y a un moment où le coût, enfin, le bailleur arrête parce que le projet est fini. On a fini de réaliser le pont. Et comment faire pour entretenir ce pont qui a été, ou une route qui a été créée ou financée, soit à crédit ou en fait cofinancée ou financée par l'État. Toujours est-il que peu importe le financement, cette infrastructure a besoin de vivre. Et pour pouvoir faire vivre l'infrastructure, comme je l'ai indiqué, il y a un cadre national, on a créé un fonds d'entretien routier. Ce fonds, il requiert des ressources, et ces ressources servent à entretenir, comme son nom l'indique, fonds d'entretien routier. Ces ressources servent à entretenir les infrastructures routières. Donc, pour ce qui concerne la Côte d'Ivoire, vraiment, c'est très important pour nous de noter que ce fonds aide beaucoup la Côte d'Ivoire dans la pérennisation des infrastructures que vous voyez qui se réalisent partout sur l'étendue du territoire. Donc, comme je le dis, ce fonds sert on injecte les ressources de ce fonds-là dans l'entretien des infrastructures-là. Donc, voilà un peu ce que je voulais dire par rapport à la question qui m'a été posée. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Croix. Et en effet, il y a une très, très riche expérience sur le continent de fonds d'entretien routier qui traverse de nombreuses difficultés, hein, parce qu'il est souvent difficile d'assurer la pérennité de ce fonds, d'assurer que les fonds sont effectivement utilisés, les fonds collectés sont effectivement utilisés pour leur mission principale et ne sont pas utilisés à d'autres fins. Donc, c'est une expérience assez intéressante de la Côte d'Ivoire. Et en fait, la question spécifique, c'était est-ce que les ressources sont en même temps également investies dans des fonds de rendement, comme les fonds de pension, afin de pouvoir renforcer donc la soutenabilité. Mais merci beaucoup pour ce partage. There's a specific question on domestic resource mobilization, on how this is contributing to strengthening financial sustainability of infrastructure, more broadly on sustainable development, but more specifically on strengthening financial sustainability of infrastructure. Mr. Gedefa, would you like to share Ethiopia's experience in the area of leveraging domestic resource mobilization in strengthening infrastructure development, but also infrastructure maintenance and sustainability in the context of perhaps the water sector, but other sectors as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe domestic resource mobilization is a basic for sustainability of infrastructure. Because of the trend, most of our project is financed from the development source from the development partners, from the banks, and also from the bilaterals. So most of the financing is just for the investment. So it doesn't include the life cycle and also even at the design stage, because sustainability starts at the concept and the design time, not just we say the post-construction issue, but it is the issue starts at the formulation of any projects, any development project. So because of this, I believe domestic resource mobilization, which our policy also supports, our policies, as I said, is a full cost recovery for urban setting and operation, the maintenance cost recovery for a rural setting in terms of wash service, especially for water supply. So to support this, the ministry developed, of course, organized a fund, water development fund, which is mobilizing funds and giving a loan to the utilities based on some interest and also grace period with 2025 repayment time. So this the utilities are currently using more than 110 utilities are in this program. So some are already started repayment. So the revolving fund will support also other utilities to get loan for the investment, especially for project implementation. So there is also support for small funds for expansion and also rehabilitation of projects. So I believe, as I said, domestic resource mobilization, revolving fund is very important. And also self-financing. Some of our utilities start to finance their projects, especially those who are well organized, those who are have a capacity, especially in terms of the challenge is the capacity of the utility in terms of the logistic and the manpower is an issue. Some utilities already started to finance their projects by also by generating additional activities, like by working for as a contractor or as a consultant. So they are generating additional fund in addition to the tariff, the payment they collect from the beneficiary. So domestic mobilization is also a part of our WASH financing strategy. And also because mostly we rely on the concessional loans or the grant from the government. So I think it is a time to also go for knocking the door of banks, the commercial banks, even because it is difficult to cope with the supply and the demand, especially with the supply, with the demand. The demand is very high. The population growth is pushing, and also most of the infrastructure, old infrastructure, is deteriorating. So it needs a replacement, expansion, new schemes. So I think the usual trend should be changed to make the universal access for WASH. We have to knock every door for especially the domestic level. The second one is maybe what I want to add is on the sustainability of financing, especially for the operation, the maintenance. Any project should include post-construction component as one component during the project implementation, because the capacity building, the setup of management system, and M&D system is also should start at the start of the project. And the management is one of the issues we have, which we currently legalizing the WASH committees, legalizing the committees, and also rural utilities like multi-village water supply. We are establishing rural utilities like urban utility, and for the small on-site schemes, we have WASH costs. So I think if we improve the management, the sustainability of our infrastructure will be also good. So that is my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think beyond domestic resource mobilization, you're making a very, very important point about making sure building in the factors for sustainability from project design, particularly you mentioned the post-construction cost to be built into the design of the project from the onset to be able to address it. Excellent point that you've just made. So I have an interesting question, I think, and it speaks to the point I think Mrs. Kwanzaa made earlier regarding compensation. And this is a question from Mr. Jérémy Adomaru. So let me read the question. It's in French. L'indemnisation retarde des projets et même fait que certains projets n'aboutissent pas. Dans les pays africains, ne pouvons-nous pas mettre les indemnisations après la réalisation du projet? That's an interesting proposal from Mr. Adomaru. Let me turn to perhaps Mrs. Kwanzaa, because she had, this is a point that she made earlier about the escalation of project cost and project delays as a result of compensation. Compensation is something that for the African Development Bank is very, very important. We want to make sure that people affected by development interventions are properly, adequately compensated before the project is implemented, not afterwards, not 5 or 10 years later. So timely compensation of people affected by development interventions. But there are obviously challenges associated with that commitment that we share with our regional member countries. And Mrs. Kwanzaa made specific reference to these long delays and and additional costs associated with that. Mrs. Kwanzaa, would you like to come back to this and perhaps share a bit more of that experience in Ghana? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's why I raised it. It's an interesting question, and I think I agree with him that after paying the compensation as recipient countries, what else can we do? You get me? So, and that is why I like what Mr. Tamiru mentioned about the DRM, you see, because we use our domestic resource mobilization to pay for this compensation. I recall in the past, I think, and I agree the African Development Bank and other development partners have done well. In the past, you insist that we pay the compensation before your contribution comes. But then I think you've also appreciated that countries face challenges. So we are able to pay this compensation over a period of time. But you also ensure that we complete the compensation before you complete the project. So that is why in my submission, I'm saying that let's all start thinking of other innovative means of financing that, so that it doesn't delay the project. Because the typical example I gave is, if you, assuming you have 15 road projects or 15 infrastructure projects that you are supposed to, in a year or two, pay compensation, what percentage of your budget will you allocate for this payment of compensation, whilst you have our development partners, we have our development partners also paying for the other costs? I believe we should sit down and find, since you AfDB and other MDBs, you assisted us in paying over a period of time, looking at where the world is going and all the poly crisis we are having. I think we should sit down again, you get me, and see what other ways can we use. We want to pay. We all agree that once you are, it's an agreed thing. So we want to pay, but it's because of the budget constraints. So we want to sit down with you again, or if African Development Bank can have some studies done to see other ways that we can use in paying the compensation, so that we don't delay the projects. You see, because when we delay it escalates the cost. And at the end of the day, the financial sustainability is also compromised. You get me? Because you may have communities waiting forever that this road project will be, so that they can also start economic activities, either along the road or other programs that may come on. We don't finish the project, also doesn't, and it comes with other challenges. So it's something that our bank, African Development Bank, let's sit down and look at it again, because of the poly crisis your countries are facing. And let's see what we want to pay, but help us to address it. Because maybe you can do a study to look at how much of compensation, what contributes or what constitutes compensations various countries pay for infrastructure projects vis-a-vis their statutory payments and their discretionary budget, the social sector budgets, etc. And maybe based on that, we can come out with, you may realize that it's a strain, and we should find ways of handling, not only for African Development Bank, but look for the ones other partners, other development partners are supporting, that we have to pay. I believe we should find ways, but we want to pay, and I think it's an important one. And apart from that, what we are doing is, you know, that because of challenges with financing, you may have earmarked projects, and we have EMI project sites. And at times, you know, you have challenges of people taking some parts of government land, etc. And you realize these are some of the challenges that bring about you feel legally taking government land, and you want me to compensate you to move out of the land. I think we should start looking at some of these conversations. You get me? This is government land that has been earmarked, and then you illegally take, and then I have to compensate you to move from I have to compensate you for your illegality. I think it's something that we should get our lawyers and we should start looking at it. Yes, we understand the environmental and social safety considerations, but you've illegally taken my land and I have to compensate you to leave my land. I believe we should start looking at this very carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kwanzaa. And I think I'd like, because this is an excellent question from Mr. Adomah, I think I'd like to give the opportunity to other members of the panel to also share their experience on this critical issue about compensation of PAPs. Because I can see, even from your body language, Mr. Gedefa and Mr. Grohl, I can see that you can relate to some of the issues and challenges that Mrs. Kwanzaa was mentioning. Je vais peut-être commencer par Monsieur Firmin Croix sur cette question vraiment qui est assez qui est au centre des préoccupations en matière de développement des infrastructures sur notre continent, qui a été soulevée par Monsieur Ademaou. Excellente question. Il faut qu'on trouve en effet des solutions innovantes pour répondre pour pouvoir prendre en charge la compensation des personnes affectées par les interventions de manière efficiente, de manière équitable, mais sans entraver la bonne conduite de la mise en œuvre de ces infrastructures d'une manière efficiente, rapide et à des coûts qui sont raisonnables et d'une façon qui soit équitable. Monsieur Croix, à vous peut-être d'abord sur cette expérience, je suis sûr très riche en Côte d'Ivoire au vu des infrastructures routières que nous avons ici à Abidjan. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Je voulais remercier Madame Yvonne parce qu'elle a soulevé une question qui est assez importante, une question qui est très préoccupante en ce qui concerne les dédommagements. Vous voyez, en Côte d'Ivoire, comme vous venez de le souligner, il y a beaucoup d'infrastructures. Et avant la conception de ces infrastructures, les populations sont installées à Abidjan. Et quand on dit, par exemple, qu'un projet doit passer sur tel axe, mais il faut déplacer ou dédommager ces populations, les déplacer pour qu'on puisse concevoir ou construire l'infrastructure. Mais le problème qui se pose souvent, je crois qu'il y a des exemples comme ça, où on a déplacé récemment le 4e pont que nous sommes en train d'établir là, on a déplacé des populations, on a construit l'infrastructure, mais là où on a logé ces populations, parce que ces populations-là, initialement, avaient des activités génératrices de revenus. Donc, pour concevoir un projet, on trouve que c'est un obstacle, on déplace les populations. Mais quand vous déplacez ces populations-là et que vous ne créez pas des cadres économiques ou des activités génératrices pour ces revenus et pour ces populations, vous convenez avec moi que ces populations vont revenir se réinstaller là où l'infrastructure doit passer. Donc ça, c'est un problème qui est très, très important en Côte d'Ivoire. Et par moments, les gens se plaignent, oui, on a dédommagé les populations, mais après, ils sont revenus s'installer. Tout ça, je pense que la banque qui soutient, la Banque africaine de développement, qui soutient et aide beaucoup les pays africains, devait, dans la conception des projets-là, intégrer à créer des activités génératrices de revenus là où on installe les populations que vous déplacez. Sinon, si on ne fait pas ça, ces populations-là vont revenir chaque fois que vous allez faire une infrastructure et constituer un danger pour cette infrastructure-là. Parce qu'elles vont venir s'installer encore autour. L'infrastructure ne pourra pas, l'objectif de peut-être libérer, réduire les embouteillages, on ne va pas atteindre cet objectif-là. Donc, pour ma part, je pense que la banque devait revoir dans la conception des projets orientés, c'est-à-dire doit faire des projets orientés vers les recettes. Construire des infrastructures orientées vers les recettes. Quand vous vous déplacez, le gouvernement dit, bon, c'est le gouvernement qui doit dédommager. Le gouvernement va dédommager, c'est vrai. Et surtout que l'épargne locale, elle est faible. On va, les budgets, comme Mme Yvonne l'a indiqué tout à l'heure, nos budgets sont très souvent déficitaires. Et quand on va dédommager ces populations-là, et que la banque ou le partenaire va aider à construire, et que ces populations reviennent, il faut encore dédommager alors que nos budgets ne suffisent pas. Donc, je pense pour ma part que la banque devait réfléchir dans la conception des projets, au lieu qu'on déplace les populations sans leur permettre d'avoir accès ou d'avoir leur activité qu'elles avaient initialement. Dans la conception, il faut voir des projets maintenant orientés vers la mobilisation de recettes. Il y a aussi l'autre aspect, il y a ce qu'on appelle le développement de zones économiques spéciales. Quand vous avez fait une autoroute, on a construit une autoroute. Et l'autoroute, initialement, la voie initialement passait dans des villes. Et donc, les populations gravitaient, puisque les usagers qui passent là, les dames venaient vendre du pain, venaient des activités, et qu'on dit, bon, l'autoroute ne passe plus dans la ville. L'autoroute va passer à 2 ou 3 kilomètres de la ville. Il faut que la banque réfléchisse dans quelle mesure on peut créer des zones économiques spéciales aux alentours de ces infrastructures-là pour que ces populations-là continuent de vivre quand elles étaient avant la création de ces infrastructures-là. Donc, voilà un peu ce que je voulais ajouter sur ce que Mme Yvonne a indiqué tout à l'heure. Il est important, les questions de dédommagement, ça a toujours été un problème. Et souvent, ça fait traîner les projets. Ces mêmes projets qui devaient permettre aux populations d'avoir un accès libre, le fait de dédommagement ou la question de dédommagement, quand ces questions sont mal faites, ça réduit le projet et ça encore constitue un obstacle pour le bon fonctionnement de l'infrastructure qui a été créée. Donc, voilà ce que je voulais ajouter sur ce que Mme Yvonne a indiqué tout à l'heure concernant les dédommagements des projets. Merci.
Excellente suggestion, excellente intervention, M. Croix, qui nous permet vraiment de trouver des pistes intéressantes en matière de soutenabilité des projets, en s'assurant que les personnes qui ont été affectées arrivent à trouver d'autres sources de revenus et de subsistance au-delà de la vie du projet. Mr. Gedefa, would you like to weigh in as well? I'm sure the water sector in Ethiopia is also confronted with the same issue, the same challenge. Would you like to share a bit your perspective on this?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think this is very sensitive topic, which we challenged especially in development projects. In our case in Ethiopia, it says that before starting any development project, our environment, especially the environment law, says that any right-of-way issues and related social and environment issue should be cleared 1 year before start of the project. This is on the paper, of course. The issue is actually this will not be in action. Most of the time, our project is delayed because of the right-of-way issues. So in specific to water wash program, wash projects, we divide it into two: the large schemes and the small schemes. Especially the small scheme is mostly the beneficiary are especially on-site schemes. We didn't face any challenges for the hand pumps and spring for those schemes, but mostly for the big schemes like for water supply for urban, multi-village water scheme for rural areas, we face challenges. In principle, as a sector, we don't pay a compensation at the federal level. We have agreement with a regional or the beneficiaries. We say agreement, we sign agreement, MOU, that the local government will responsible for compensation based on the local or the regional law. There is a constitution, each region have a constitution, each region have a law for the, which is the law for the compensation. So compensation is based on the law. So mostly the federal government is not to pay any compensation like as we don't pay from the development partners, fund from the development partners. The local government will compensate, especially the utilities will pay for that. But actually this delay a project is, so my suggestion is, especially for the big project is, it should be a part of appraisal. And also, of course, not only the appraisal, starting from the project identification and also project formulation, we have to consider this issue. This is one. Finally, before we proceed to any investment or any construction, we have to clearly appraise against this issue, because the trend is mostly we are running for the construction. So after we enter to the construction, there are many issues in terms of cash, and also some request replacement of land. For example, if it's a land, replacement of land. So that is some of the issues. But in Ethiopia, land is the landowner is both the government and the citizens. So I think in some of the cases we may not face as such challenges, because it's not a private land, is solely not a private property. So there is a property of government and also individual. So in this case, we didn't face a big challenge, but especially on road sector, what I have information from the news and also from other colleagues, is a challenge because it's not only the issue of just affected people, but also relate to the environment and also other social, cultural related issues. So in WASH, we as a federal government, we have agreement with the regional government or the beneficiaries. They have to pay. So because they apply, when they apply for the fund, they know this compensation is not covered by the federal. But actually, the issue is there. It delays project, I agree. But we have to do some exercise before starting any project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gedefa, which shows the richness of the diversity of the experience in this area. And thank you also for reminding us the best practices in terms of how to address compensation of people affected by development interventions. We are running a bit out of time, so I'd like to just give the opportunity as a last question to the panel, the opportunity to my colleague Samson, who's happens to be in the IDEV office room that I see on the screen. Who has a question for the panel, and this will be the last question before we close. Thank you. Samson, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Armand. And thank you very much to the panelists. And I think this is a very important issue, this issue of compensation. And I know that recently the bank did finance compensation in few countries, but on case-by-case basis. But again, the challenge for the bank is how to make sure that the bank does not get into a risky activities. As you know, in most of our countries, the land market is not really under control. And usually when there is compensation, it's an opportunity for people to make money, and usually the land prices increase. So in your countries, how can you make sure that if the bank if the bank commits to finance compensation, the bank will not get into the situation where the budgets allocated for the compensation will keep increasing because of the increase of the land prices? I think we have many examples in some countries. I don't want to give the name of countries, but we are currently conducting an evaluation on counterpart funding, and this is one of the issues that we have been discussing with people in the regional member countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samson, and really just emphasizing how critical this issue is. Merci beaucoup à Monsieur Adomao qui a soulevé peut-être la question, l'éléphant rose dans la salle. C'est vraiment une question qui préoccupe tous les participants à ce panel et donc qui est très pertinent. Mrs. Kwanzaa, would you like to, in response to Samson's comments, would you like to respond a bit as a some last final
I agree
comments?
with something. I agree with something on what he said, because like you know, Tamir was saying that it should be part of appraisal, right?
Yes. As
so
best practices.
Yes, it should be part of the appraisal. And so if from beginning, when the project is being appraised, you know, you really need to set a cutoff date. That is the issue. AfDB, something. If you set a cutoff date and the time you did the appraisal and it's completed, and we know the people who will be affected, it then helps with the payment of compensation. You know, right now, all countries, we are going digital. Ghana, we have the Ghana card, isn't it? So if the time you're doing this is just what is coming, but I think we can be looking at it. So if the time that is being appraised and we have the LAs, they have their digital cards and etc., it makes it better for us to then pay the compensation, because we then agree that at the time of appraisal, this were the people that will be affected, because we all know that once they have an idea that there's going to be some form of compensation, etc., by the time you realize, additional people would have joined. But I think we should start going digital with those who were really affected at the time of appraisal, and I believe it will help all of us. It will. So these are some of the ideas, but like he said, we can be looking at, we are all going digital now, and so it will help, so that those who even left at that time, at least you have some good idea of how, yeah, but those are some of the ideas that I just brought, because it's more of like, once they hear that the population will increase within that enclave, and it didn't, but we should put it out on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kwanzaa. And I think we'll end this very interesting conversation on this note. And I think I would like to first thank the members of this panel, this brilliant panel, but that really took the time to share with us the very rich set of experience and the challenges they experience in improving sustainability of development interventions in their own area, the road infrastructure in Côte d'Ivoire, the water sector projects and the WASH strategy in Ethiopia, the very rich experience in Ghana as well. Thank you very much for your time and for the rich experience that you have shared today. I'd like also to thank the participants to this webinar. I've seen a very rich set of comments and exchanges on the chat box. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to pick up all the questions that were raised, but we will be able to follow up through the proper channels on these questions and exchanges. So thank you very much, all of you, for your participation to this conversation. Jane, over to you, please.
Thank you, Amon. I see one hand raised from one of your panelists. Maybe we can give him a minute. That is Dr. Kwa Fama. I think he has a comment to make. Go ahead.
Oui, je voulais faire un petit commentaire sur la préoccupation de votre collègue de la BAD et dire que pour ce qui concerne la Côte d'Ivoire, il y a une structure que l'État a mise en place qu'on appelle l'AFOR. Parce que comme il a indiqué, les questions de terre ou de dédommagement passent d'abord par l'immatriculation des terres. Quand vous prenez des localités à l'intérieur dans un village et qu'une infrastructure doit passer par là, il faut bien qu'on sache, comme Madame Yvonne l'a indiqué, qui doit être dédommagé, qui est le véritable, la véritable personne qui doit peut-être recevoir le dédommagement. Donc, ceci part d'abord du cadre institutionnel. Donc, l'AFOR est une structure étatique qui essaie de donner l'immatriculation des terres aux populations afin que ces populations ayant des droits de propriété, quand on sait qu'une infrastructure doit passer dans une localité, on connaît le vrai propriétaire. Et en ce moment-là, les questions de entendre que les gens doivent être dédommagés, une population qui était initialement à 5, et quand on sait qu'une infrastructure doit passer par là, bon, un matin, on se réveille, vous retrouvez 1000 personnes. Du coup, on ne sait pas qui est le vrai détenteur de l'accès. Donc, c'est important que le cadre institutionnel là précise ou crée cette situation pour éviter le désordre, éviter le surcoût de l'investissement, et après, ça devient difficile pour la partie État de respecter ces engagements-là. Donc, c'est cet élément-là que je voulais partager avec vous. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Kwak. Je crois que c'est un point extrêmement important de renforcer donc le cadre institutionnel pour justement éviter tous les abus qui peuvent être liés à la question des compensations, tout l'accompagnement qui doit se faire en amont pour s'assurer que le processus soit aussi transparent, aussi équitable que possible et suivre toutes les procédures en la matière. Donc, merci beaucoup pour cette contribution. Voilà, donc je vous remercie encore une fois donc pour votre participation à ce panel qui a été très riche en échanges et d'expériences. Merci beaucoup, et je vois que nous avons également eu une très riche participation. Je vois 113 participants à cette conversation qui reflète, je crois, tout l'intérêt qui est porté à ce sujet qui est la soutenabilité financière des interventions de développement. Donc, merci encore beaucoup pour cette participation, cette conversation très intéressante.